I'm not going to give it away, but like I will give it away. So the three core character traits that every great person has had in my mind, if you did a study on this, discipline, attitude, and perseverance. I think you'd be hard pressed to go back in time and look at any great people who have done anything that's been like one of those wow things that didn't have those three things.
Welcome to Iron Summit, where we cover topics about health, fitness, and general performance through the eyes of former elite Division I wrestlers.
All right, we're live. All right, so we got Chris Ayres here, head coach of Stanford Wrestling, formerly at Princeton for 18 years, and then it was 5 years at Lehigh, right?
Yep, that's right. I was a coach, and then I wrestled there too. So it was actually it was about 11 years in total, so about 5.5 coaching.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think obviously we worked together, but something that I didn't know right away, that's one of probably the most impressive stat that I think I honestly found out pretty recently was, going from not placing at state in high school to like an All-American in college. I think that's a crazy growth trajectory and probably not the traditional path. And so I don't know. I wanted to ask you about that kind of on air, and been holding back a little bit in the office from asking you that till now.
Yeah, it was honestly, I think it's helped me be a good coach, just because it's all mental, right? When you get to the highest levels, and it's all how you approach competition, and really how you handle adversity too. So the story goes, I probably should have placed at states, but I had my goal set on being a state champion. I felt like I worked the hardest that I could to achieve that goal. There are two things where I kind of went wrong, I guess you could say. Is one is that I thought that you won the match in training. So it was in my mind, I was like, if I work harder than the other guy and I do, all the right things outside of the competition, then I should get the result that I want. Well, the reality is you have to compete too. So I think I went in maybe a little overconfident. And then when things started going wrong in a match, I sort of would panic a little bit and be like, this shouldn't happen to me. I did the work. This guy should just kind of roll over, but he had other ideas of what should happen in a match. So it was a very immature way of competing. And the other thing was, I just lacked resiliency. I was supposed to win states in my mind, and when I lost in an early round, I just didn't bounce back. I felt bad for myself. Went into the wrestlebacks, still thinking about losing and not being a state champion. And I just kind of rolled over. When the going got tough, I didn't get tough. And so for me in my career, looking back on that was like easily, unequivocally, my greatest regret was not competing in the wrestlebacks. And so I think fast forward to coaching, I'm pretty aware of the emotions that when you lose and go into the backside, that you have to be able to turn that around. And I always say, especially after the semifinals, those guys, I want them to take third, but that's a tough match to lose just because you think you're there, you're going to be in the finals, and then something goes wrong. And then on the backside, you don't want to have that semi slide to sixth. So I think that, that experience for me, was an impactful one. One thing that I was though, after that loss and I didn't place, I probably quit wrestling for, like a week or so. And then I flipped it, and we're only people of extremes, us wrestlers. So I went from quitting wrestling to about a week later, I'm going to win a national title in Division I. So there was no sort of middle ground in my decision-making process. And then that kind of started the path to, doing what I did in college. And I essentially walked on to Lehigh. And the amazing thing about that experience, just in terms of, development, was in my room in high school, before I went to Blair, went to a public high school, Newton High School. I had great coaches at Newton too that were awesome. And then I went to Blair for a year, and then I ended up at Lehigh. But in the Newton room, there just wasn't examples on the team of like what does a state champ do, or what does a state placer do. There was no state placers or state champs. So I had this, a state champion was sort of this mythical figure in my mind of like this guy who, woke up at 4. He, had milk and rocks for breakfast, and then
It was like shoot
yeah,
from Vision Quest, like
yeah,
carrying
yeah,
the log up the
eh,
stadium stairs.
yeah, yeah, exactly right. So shoot was the state champ, and I worked really hard. I did actually get up and work out in the mornings before school and those type of things. And then when I went to Blair and then also Lehigh, they both had, examples of guys who were competing at the highest level nationally, all Americans, national champs. And so it was kind of funny. I actually saw them. And when I was training with them, I kind of thought they were slackers actually, compared to like what I was willing to go through. And so that gave me like and then I would beat them in the room, etc. And sort of, I realized, like, yeah, I was training harder than everyone. I just didn't know it. And then also I was willing to do more. So almost in an instant, it flipped for me, mentally. And that's the shift that I needed, that like I could win nationals. I didn't do it, but I did pretty well. And so that was sort of a quick version of, how I was able to do what I was able to do. And the backside thing really, that when I got away from it and I looked back, I was sort of embarrassed by the way I handled myself. And I just think it was just getting a little bit older and gaining a little bit of maturity. And just a little regret also, just like, you should have got third. Like, why didn't you take the necessary steps to do that? I gained a lot of maturity from that experience. And then the Blair and the Lehigh, having models around to emulate and see where I stand was really important.
I think too,
Did you
like,
go ahead, Ryan?
no, you got it, Max.
Question. I was curious, did you end up at Lehigh through the Blair connection? Is that
Yeah.
so what led you there?
My story is, I mean, it's a long story, but like, so I had trained at Blair, in the summers. Jeff Buxton, the Blair coach, he had an interesting thing. It's kind of how Blair got good, is he was big into freestyle, and he let anyone come into the room in the off season. So I had started training there going into my junior year. And then, going into my senior year summer, go to my senior year that summer, I trained there. Then I graduated. I was supposed to go to another school, actually. I had paid the deposit to go to another school. And I was sitting against the wall like you do. And I was kind of like, I don't know, I was just contemplating, how it is after practice, those moments against the wall.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there just contemplating things, and had a great workout. And he comes over, he says, "What's up?" I go, I really don't want to go to the school that I paid the deposit for. And he said, "You should come here." And I said, at the time, it was a prep school. It was, I don't know, at the time it was expensive. Call it today's day and age, I don't know what Blair cost, probably $50,000, but back then I don't know what it was. And I just said, like, I didn't come from money or anything, or we were very middle class, if that. So at the time, and so he goes, "Oh, you'll come for free." He knew sort of my background. So I ended up. He said, "Just do a PG year." I didn't even know what a PG year was. So that kind of changed the trajectory of everything, because I told him I wanted to go to Lehigh. Lehigh didn't recruit me. I went to all their camps. I was obsessed with this guy, Sergei Beloglazov.
Yep.
At the time, he was the coach at Lehigh. I would follow this guy around from camp to camp to camp. I went to Lehigh camp every year. And so he says, "You should come here and be a PG." And we have a bunch of PGs coming in. And he said, "We'll put you on a good path to possibly getting into Lehigh." The same thing happened at Lehigh too. I looked at the price tag and I was like, I didn't even know about financial aid. Like, so I'm a first generation college kid. Lehigh at the time was probably, 40,000 or something like that. So I just took it off my list. I was like, we can't afford this, but I didn't know about financial aid. So when I had this Blair experience, that's the first time I knew there was like, holy crap, there's financial aid. So he goes, we'll put you on the path to Lehigh. And here's what you have to do. And so I had to go to like, it wasn't summer school. I don't know if Mr. Stovall is still around there, but his wife, Miss Stovall, I didn't know I knew how to write, but I didn't know like structurally how to write. So I had to like do summer class. So I'd go to practice and then she would tutor me in writing. So I get into Blair and Buxton's like, hey, you have to take like, here's the deal. You have to take like honors and AP courses if you do really well in those. He goes, do you think you can do well? I was like, yeah. I mean, I hadn't really tried in school that hard, to be honest with you, prior to that. I said, yeah, I really want to go. He says, well, this is how you do it. So I took all honors in AP and I got great grades. I got accepted to Lehigh. And that's pretty much how that all happened. I really recruited myself. I was probably Lehigh's easiest to recruit that if you'd call me a recruit, easiest recruit that they ever had that actually worked out to win a lot of matches. So that's sort of the path. I got really lucky. Life's like that sometimes. Where I grew up allowed me to be close to Blair, which gave me exposure to Lehigh, which led me to Princeton, which led me to here. So been blessed in that way, just sort of kind of fell into things because I certainly wasn't put on that path early on.
Yeah. And the other thing is just like from knowing you, I think you're such an overly positive person. And I think that mindset, I don't know exactly if you think this is true or not, but I feel like that probably played a big role in your ability to like keep coming back and developing because one, you love wrestling, but two, you're always like, you're keeping a good mindset about it. So you're spending a lot of time doing this and continuing to improve. And something that you say, kind of your family motto, like gentle pressure, relentlessly applied. Maybe walk us through a little bit, like how does that play in your development as, an athlete, but also as a coach? I think even when you came out to Stanford, it was like an impossible time. It was probably the worst time to come out, right? There was impossibly too many things going on
Yeah.
and you just lined them up and knocked them down. And I think that like, that would have broke a lot of people. But your mindset, I think, played a big role in that. And I kind of see this common theme in your life of that mindset. So walk me through that a little bit and how you like, did you just come up with that? Is that a family thing? How did that get
Yeah.
ingrained in?
I just think over time, like just my career trajectory in wrestling is, I I kind of say being a little delusional is okay. When I told people I was going to go D1 and, win a national title, I didn't care. And a lot of my friends that wrestled were like, you're stupid. Like, what are you doing? You're not that, I mean, D3 winning a national title there is extremely hard too. But I was like, you know what? I want to compete at the highest level. And that's kind of always been my mindset. I wanted to be against the best people to see where I stood. So I think I like those challenges, but I just always had that in me, I guess, like just to keep at something. It's just, I don't know if my parents ingrained that in me a little bit, like blue collar. You get up early every morning and you go bust your ass and hopefully down the road, good things happen. And so that's kind of what I've applied to my life, I think. And then, things happen and where it's like you have these experiences that impact you. Where I got the gentle pressure relentlessly applied is kind of interesting too, is I got my master's at Lehigh. Once I had a business job, about this, Ryan, where I was looking at Excel sheets and it was a great job and I could have went and made some good money, but I was in a cubicle in a suit, looking at spreadsheets for 12 hours a day. At the end of that internship, it was a great experience. Why? Because I knew exactly what I did not want to do with my life. So that meant I was a business major at Lehigh. So that meant like now I got a course correct. So I decided to get a master's in education. I'm going to teach and coach. During that time, I had to teach at a school for kids who couldn't go to regular school. So these kids, I mean, imagine the worst kid you ever went to school with in like elementary and middle school. And that kid is an angel. compared to all the kids that they brought to this school. I'm not kidding. So it's a satellite school for the district's toughest kids.
Wow.
So at this place, this is the positive reinforcement thing too. So at this school, there was the director. His name was Dr. George. This guy was like, he was a Jedi master. I mean, he was like Yoda, and he was like as tall as Yoda too. He's this very small guy, but he was like amazing. And so, in this school, I'm getting on a little bit of a tangent, but it's pretty neat. So in this school, what they used to do with these bad kids is they'd secure them. They'd like tackle a kid who was having a hard time. They'd literally take them to this padded room and they'd lock them in the room. And the kid would be freaking out, going wild, and it would be crazy. And this guy had this positive reinforcement thing. He did two things that were like amazing, and he implemented it through the whole school: positive reinforcement and then go into the good model. So it was like this weird thing where, like, let's say, you've been in class and there's a kid screwing around, right? And the teacher immediately goes over to the kid that's screwing around. And it's like, hey, you need to get your act together, or I'll send you to the principal's office. Well, we were taught, like, you go to the kid that's sitting next to him that's doing a good job. So instead of going to the kid that's freaking out, you go over to the good kid and you tap on his desk and you say, hey, I really love how you're doing your work here, sitting quietly, really, really just doing a great job. And we had these little tickets that they could turn in and get candy in the store. So I'd say, hey, I'm going to give you one of these tickets. You're doing such a good job. But then you just walk away, you pay no mind to the kid who's freaking out. Kid's still freaking out. And then you go over to the kid that's sitting in front of him. You say, hey, buddy, you're doing such a good job. You give the kid a ticket, you walk away. Sure enough, the kid that was like, freaking out, he gets in line. And you say, I really like that you got yourself together. Here's a ticket. So, but anyway,
Awesome.
the long story short is when these kids came in over the summer, they would be, because most of them had really terrible family lives. That's pretty much the common theme among most of them, was it's just no stability, foster care, those type of things. So when they came in from the summer, it was, if you could think of a madhouse, it was a madhouse. And the teacher, the head guy would be like, hey, gentle pressure relentlessly applied. So every day you did it. And literally within a month, the kids were pretty much in line. So I had that experience, which sort of, reinforced what I was doing already. I kind of already stuck to things. And it was just like kind of an eye opener, both on the positive reinforcement side. And then also just like sticking to things, it takes time, and you generally get good results. And so my wrestling career as an athlete kind of went that way. Then I take over Princeton, which at the time was, maybe, I hate to say it, but we were in last place in the country by far. I mean, there was 2 years we didn't send a guy to NCAAs. We were 0-32. By the way, I think it's 0-35, but every year I take off a loss. I'm trying to get down to 20. I'm trying to get to 0-29 in a few years.
I didn't want to tell you, but I looked it up. It was first 2 years 0-35. So
okay, so I was 0-32, and and then we built something there too, and that was so rewarding, because really in the beginning there were, you start to question yourself a lot when things aren't, and people, when you're the coach too, it's, when you're an athlete, people might question you a little bit, but like when you're the coach of a team and there's a lot of people that care about the team, people start thinking, was this the right hire? So thinking those things out, I think those experiences allowed me to do what I do. And it's really, now that I'm the age that I'm at, I just kind of have, a good perspective on what I think I have to bring to the table to do things. And I think it is that gentle pressure relentlessly applied.
I love it. I have a couple questions. One is, and I'll flatter us here, Chris. You've coached
sweet.
at 3 of the most prestigious academic institutions in the country, being Lehigh, of course, and Princeton and Stanford. But how does it differ? I mean, you kind of went straight to Lehigh and then Princeton and Stanford, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're coaching at an institution that takes academics so seriously. It was a wrestling coaching aspect, but then also a kind of coaching and teaching how to manage that academic load. So how do you approach that?
Well, I think I'm blessed to have coached at these places because you get such a unique individual who not only cares about the wrestling side of it, the athletic piece, but they want to be great in multiple areas of their lives. Sometimes to their own demise, they're so interested in so many different things that, it's hard to peg, kind of specialize in a couple, like maybe wrestling in school. But I'm blessed because, people ask me, it's a funny question I get a lot about recruiting. Like, how do you determine a kid's character? Like, what are the things you look at? And I'm like, I just look at their transcript, man. It's like they're in AP classes, they're in honors classes. Generally, you don't get you don't get too many jerks who are trying to get into those type of school, the highly academic. The other thing is, for me personally, wrestling helped me be great in life. I'm working on being great in life, but just I really feel the lessons learned carry over to all areas of life. The characteristic traits that you focus on and gain through the sport, and what you get at a school, Lehigh, Princeton, Stanford, is you get kids who can now apply those at the highest level and be, run a hedge fund, freaking be president, the things, Princeton, we had two Secretary of Defenses, so there's just so many things that they can do using the vehicle of wrestling, and that's incredibly rewarding. So I've told Ryan this, and I've told several people. I just think I'm built for Stanford. I'm built for this experience, just from my former experiences, to step into Stanford in year one, and then be a lot further than where I was in year one of Princeton. Is exciting. It's really exciting. I don't have to do a rebuild. I get to work with some of the best people in the country to take this to what I think can be a national championship team at some point. So, so it's a blessing to have been at these places and work with these type of kids. I mean, they blow me away too. I mean, just with what they do and the classes they're taking and the internships they get. It's just a really cool thing to see that.
Well, the more we can associate Lehigh with Stanford and Princeton, the better. So
Max has this ulterior motive.
I just want to keep putting them in the same sentence. Yeah.
That's good.
Hey,
That's good. I like it.
I also have quick aside is because you said you got to pick a couple things to be good at. When I got to Lehigh, Coach Hughes, one of the assistant coaches there at the time, he sat me down. He said, "Max, you can be good at two things in college. Pick two." And he said, "Everyone wants to be good at three. Pick two: school, sports, and social. Yeah. Which two do you think I want you to be good at?"
Yeah.
So
Strobel used to say the same exact thing. So that's pretty funny.
He probably got it from Strobel,
Pat, who got it from Strobel, probably. It's true.
That is true. I was lucky enough I was starting to be recruited by Strobel, and then he retired right after, right after I committed to Lehigh. But then Pat and Hughes were awesome. Yeah. A lot of wisdom there. One other question, and Ryan told me this. I didn't know you ran Lehigh's weight room for a little bit. The rest of the weight room?
I did. I want to preface this before you start with this, Ayres. I think another common theme that I've seen throughout just, your career and then just knowing you too is like you lean into stuff and you do your research on stuff and you really get educated about things. And it's not even I mean, we'll have a conversation about something, but I didn't even know you were interested in this thing. And then it's like, oh, you actually have done a lot of research. So it's really interesting to me that, you know a lot about weightlifting and you did a lot of this stuff. And how did that really happen? And walk us through, Lehigh's.
So I don't look like it because I'm a tall, skinny guy, but, and I don't even know if I told you this, Ryan, but that was the key. Other than those mental things at states not placing, I was the same height I am now. I was an All-American at 157. I probably weigh 175 right now. But I wrestled 135. So one thing I was missing was strength. And it wasn't for the fact that I didn't lift. I lifted like crazy, but I hadn't really matured yet. I didn't mature until probably my sophomore summer of my mature in the sense of going out a little bit, getting bigger, muscular wise. I didn't really mature until that year. And so I was always like a little bit of a mad scientist. I followed this guy Sergey around, just to give you some idea of how like I approach things. So how I found this guy was kind of crazy. The Russians were the best by far back in the late 80s and early 90s. I found out this guy was like a 7 or 8-time Olympic and world gold medalist. And then you see you'd get like USA Wrestling magazine, you'd see the box scores of the matches, and I'd see he'd just like tech everyone or pin them or whatever. I was like, God, this guy is like a freak. So somehow I ran into this guy, Don Ernst. He had all these videos. So then I got these Sergey videos. So this is how I got obsessed with like technique and Sergey. So similarly with the weightlifting, this is funny. Like I would get like, back then there was no YouTube or anything. I didn't have Huberman giving me the proper protocols, right? So I had to like kind of do my own research. So kind of started with like bodybuilding. I had like Muscle and Fitness magazine, which actually was kind of good because it was sort of hypertrophy stuff, So that's what I needed. I had no muscles. I needed some muscles before I could think about some serious strength. So those bodybuilders are higher level reps and trying to get jacked up. And so then I don't know how I ran into a guy in high school who kind of knew the science behind it. And I don't know when periodization came out, but it was around that time that I started learning about it. It might have came out sooner. And then there was like this bigger, faster, stronger program that was sort of based on periodization. I had started using that and I was pretty successful with it. So, I didn't go in the gym and like look at the biggest, most jacked guy in the gym and say, hey, what do you lift? Like, what's your routine? Which back in those days, that's kind of how you got lifting routines. You're like, hey, that guy has huge biceps. Like, I wonder how he got those huge biceps. And then the gym guy would teach. So I did try to find as much information as I could about weightlifting. So I felt pretty, and you know what? Santoro was similar. So Santoro was my coach. He was the assistant and he used to run the lifts. So he used to put me through lifts. So when I came in and Pat had left, he goes to Maryland and then I take his position. I kind of fell into it, to be honest with you, but I had a really good education on like weightlifting. I thought, and I felt good about it. So that's kind of how I came into it. No, I don't I do my research, like you said. I'm a student. I love that stuff, in relation to, now you do have podcasts. We talk about them in the office a lot about, when I was telling you about photons, Ryan, get those photons in the morning from the sun. So that's a little inside thing, but, so I researched it. I felt confident. I knew protocols for guys who were cutting weight. I like what they should be doing, guys who wanted to get bigger. And so, back in those days, there's no strength coaches for wrestling. I mean, that's just the fact of it. Maybe football had a strength coach. The position of strength coach was non-existent. The guy who ran, the gym for the whole school, like he would write programs for like soccer and he would try to write one for wrestling. And we'd be like, what the hell is this shit? Like, this isn't good. And so, I just did the research and implemented it. It's a little trial and error too.
Just like briefly, what would that look like? Like just brief overview of, obviously you're just saying you had some different plans for different, for guys, but.
So basically, again, it depends on what you wanted to do. I could give you I know I moved up a year, so I had a pretty intense hypertrophy phase that lasted a pretty long time over the summer, going from my sophomore to my junior year, where I knew I had to get bigger. I actually was doing body parts at that time. So that's kind of like I see strength coaches now that are sort of like almost full body all the time, but that really helped create a base. And then I sort of like, as we got into the season, I was big enough by the time I got into the season, I actually had to lose some weight. So then I cut back to like more of a strength protocol where, we're doing way less reps than hypertrophy can be hit pretty high, 8 to, quite a few. So going a little bit heavier, but not as many reps. So I didn't want to gain weight through hypertrophy. I kind of want to teach the fibers to just work better, and be able to handle more force. And so that would be more of a, strength protocol. Power was sort of like a little bit of a power phase, but not too much. And then once you hit season, it's sort of like maintenance. You get one or two maybe lifts during the week. If you have a good little segment there, where you can get maybe a couple weeks of 2 or 3 where you don't have competition. And then we moved into that. So that kind of was basically what I looked at when planning other guys' stuff. It's just sort of like, how long should hypertrophy be? How long should strength be? How long should the maintenance be? So that's kind of how I segmented it out. And it was nice to have me doing it because it was just me with the team. And I knew every aspect of their training. I actually did it at Princeton too when I started. And then we kind of got a guy who was interested in wrestling. And so I was like, maybe we'll use this guy. So I've moved away from it, but there's definitely some huge benefit to having someone who is aware of, hey, what exactly happened in practice yesterday? And we're going to have a lift this morning. How do I cater that lift to what just happened at practice? I get nervous about that because I don't have control, but through the day to day, as you know, Ryan, it like gets away from you a little bit.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ryan. I think we're going to ask the same question.
Yeah. I think this is a good segue into basically, like, obviously we kind of talk about this a lot, Ayres, but like, what are your thoughts on recovery and then periodization in terms of wrestling, and how you're just like general overview of what you think? Because wrestling's a high demanding sport on your body. And I mean, I used to have coaches that'd be like, back to the 3 thing you're talking about earlier, Max, like, you got running shape, wrestling shape, and lifting shape, and you can pick 2. You can't be in all 3. And you kind of go through, usually most programs, early season, there's maybe some more running, off season, more lifting, and then in season, obviously wrestling is very heavy, but injuries are a huge part of it. And so like your general overview of what your philosophy is with rest, recovery, I think you do an awesome job in terms of, we make sure guys kind of fill out forms, make sure they like what they're feeling like before practice. You're the first coach I've ever been around that's like, hey, if you don't feel good, like pull yourself out alive. And I think that's awesome because it kind of takes, like, nobody can tell you how you're feeling. Yeah. And you got to trust the guys and they got to trust you too. But I think you really think about recovery a lot more than most people. And I think it's huge, especially when you talk about a 6-month long season.
It's great you mentioned that because in my career, it's just come up more and more where I just think it's more and more important. And now we're hearing, like Huberman and just different podcasts, the greatest, I heard someone recently say the greatest athletic enhancing, like athletic performance driver is sleep. Like the number, like forget supplements, forget sleep is your greatest weapon. It's funny. Pat used to say that stuff too. Recovery is your number one weapon, basically. So a lot of coaches are like, push guys. We got to push them. My guys are highly motivated at this level. Most of the guys in the starting lineup have goals of being an All-American or a national champion. So we have the luxury of saying, like, when do we have to pull these guys back? And being aware of where they are mentally and physically is important. I think, we had a situation this year. I don't know if, 2020 hindsight's perfect, but, we had a kid who was like pushing himself through an injury. You know who I'm talking about, Ryan, where we had to step in and say, look, you're not wrestling. He just wanted to wrestle in this dual meet. His parents were coming from a long distance to watch the match. He wasn't ready at all, but he just wanted to compete. So it had to be us telling him he's not allowed to compete. And it was the right call, to be honest. He actually missed the next competition and he was able to compete, not at his optimal in the CKLV, but he competed pretty well. Where if I think we would have wrestled him, I don't think we would have wrestled at CKLV and we probably would have continued to have issues. So I got that from Strobel too. It's funny, we keep going back to this high school thing.
Okay.
I got to erase it. The other thing in high school, I absolutely was overtrained 100%. I talk about videos. There was this video, Competitor Supreme, which was Gable and the Iowa teams. And it was like, we train like madmen, So I took that literally and I took it to a whole nother level where I literally, by the end of the season, I was completely overtrained. As we were going into the postseason, it was like, you have to do more now. We have to get like super in shape. And so a great story about that is, and this was an eye opener too. So I was very vocal about my own, like I would say if I didn't like something about the training plan, or if I felt something wasn't good for myself or the team, I had no problem, even as a freshman, saying something to coaches and just asking them like, what's going on? Why are we doing this? I just wanted to know why. So we're heading into Easterns my freshman year, Strobel's first year as a head coach too. And so we're heading in and the practices are like, they're like ridiculously easy. I mean, I'm like, they're an hour. I'm like, the practice ends and I'm doing more because I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Is this guy giving up on us? And so, so I'm like concerned because in my experience, it was like in middle school, it was like, we got to get ready for counties. Like this is the big thing. And we're doing extra sprints and, a bunch of stuff we never did before. Practices are longer. So I actually go to Strobel's office and I sit down and I'm like, hey, like, what's going on? He's like, what do you mean what's going on? I was like, these practices are like the easiest practices I've ever done. Honestly, like we have EIWAs, NCAs are in 2 weeks. And he goes, he was so funny. He goes, trust me. He goes, I want you dying to wrestle at EIWAs. He goes, so I'm taking it away from you. He goes, you've been training really hard, like up until this point. I want you to have so much energy, you don't know what to do with it. He goes, just trust me. And he was the Olympic coach at the time. And so it was like, okay. You take the wheel. I'm in. But if I don't do well, we're going to have some issues with this training plan. So anyway, I'm seeded 4th or whatever. I make the finals. I take 2nd as a freshman, which is pretty good in the IWA. Go to nationals. I probably wasn't even good enough to make the nationals. Somehow, I think with the training plan, I made it. Didn't do great, but from that point, I was bought in. And then he explained it after. He's like, I learned this from running marathons. And I think at the time, tapering really wasn't a thing. He's like, marathon runners, he's like, they don't run the marathon like 2 days before the marathon. They run a big giant chunk of their training is like 5 weeks out. And then they actually reduce everything. Yeah. He goes, the week of the race, they really don't do much, to be honest with you. It's like they just show up at the race and they're ready to go because they're healthy, they're recovered. And so that was like that had a huge impact on me. And then also with like lifting's a great example. It's like, you don't get stronger with lifting, right? You get hypertrophy, especially, is a great example. It's like you're actually tearing muscle fibers, right? So they can grow in recovery. So it's like the recovery period is where you get stronger and bigger, not in the actual lifting of the weights. So like those type of things, they kind of show the importance of recovery, and it's a huge weapon too. I mean, at Princeton, at NCAs, we the last probably 8 years or so, we always outperformed where we were supposed to end up feed wise to a man, basically. And I do think that was to a little bit to the training plan. So recovery is it's as important, if not more important than maybe even the training. You have to do the training to some level. But if 2 guys are equally training and one guy has a better recovery plan, he's gonna feel better in competition.
Amen. Yeah. Training isn't anything without recovery.
Yeah.
You're just hurt and run down all the time. So when you think about like, it's almost like wrestling periodization, do you kind of build a plan out for the whole year and then make adjustments on a daily basis based on feedback from the guys?
Yeah.
Without giving away too much secret
No,
sauce.
there's no secrets. It's pretty simple. I mean, there's volume and there's intensity. So there's volume days where the longer goes, and Ryan, this is just how we break it up. There's volume days where the goes are longer. There's intensity days where the goes are shorter, more intense goes. Through the fall, we build up the volume in both number of workouts and then also the amount of time they're wrestling. It's been chaotic, to be honest. Ryan doesn't know this. Maybe he's caught up, but I was better at it at Princeton just because I was settled in every other area, so I could focus a little bit more on the practice plan. Here it's been, I've done it long enough where I can get a feel for the team, but generally you build, then you hit competition, and then you get about 2 of those days, and you're kind of reacting a little bit to when you compete, how tough was the competition? Did we get banged up from the competition? So when you're in competition, it's sort of like a week to week adjustment to where we are technically and how much volume they're doing and how hard things are. But I think the key points of like building up periodization are sort of like when they come back to the point of like you hit competition. The other really important phase is sort of the backside of the season as you go to NCAAs. So, when you're in competition, again, it's just sort of reactionary to each week and planning for the next weekend. So that's sort of short-term dictates what we're going to do. But then towards the end of the year, we want to have that peak at the end of the year. I have some things that I do to get them ready for the end of the year, but there's definitely the plan, and it's a little reactionary too. Pat Santoro was very good feel based. I think I'm more of a plan based. Like I have the guys know, like you. So I send out the plan for the week every week. I know that Pat didn't do that because he would make daily changes. Right? Am I right?
100% right.
He would be like, the guys need to lift tomorrow. And then you guys would all get a message, hey, we're lifting tomorrow. And so, but that's how he was good though. He had a good feel for what was needed. I'm more of a planning guy. I like the guys to know what's coming. So, there was sort of a periodization, and you build them up to the season basically.
Yeah. And one other thing, Ayres, I want to get into a little bit with you is I think like leadership. You are an extremely good leader. And I think that's not something that comes super natural to a lot of people. And maybe it came naturally to you, maybe you developed it. But I think one of the first things that you said when you came in to myself, to Pat, but also to the team is like this. I don't know if it's like your main message, but you say it a lot with like, this is a partnership, not a dictatorship. And I think you build trust very early on, very easily. And I don't know if you have if you've ever thought about this or not, but I've seen you be a really good leader. I think you're a good leader. What plays into that? And do you know like what your personal philosophy is with that? Outside of that, is that like a summary of it, or how do you feel you're thinking about these situations? Because there's a lot of gray areas that go on day to day, right? Where you don't know the right thing to do. But I think you navigate those gray areas very well.
Yeah. I think first, this is going to be funny. I love winning. And so and I hate losing. So, I was always the captain of anything I did, because I wanted control of I wanted to have some control of the outcome. And I talked about this today in that team meeting, I was captain as a sophomore at Lehigh. And what I told you guys, I think maybe in the meeting I had with you and Pat, I said, if I wrestled somebody and I did really well and they didn't have such a good day, I'd try to help them afterwards. I'd grab them and say hey, like on your single, I got you because of this. Like, so I think I've been kind of leading. It just kind of came a little naturally to me. Um, the one side thing to that is like partnerships versus dictatorships. So I'm an only child. My default is I'm a total introvert, to be honest with you. But because I like winning, I know that I have to communicate. So it's like it's not a super natural thing to me, but like I really love winning. So because I'm not like an extrovert, I don't feel like a dictator. But what I think everyone in the organization will bring something to the table. I've told you this before too, Ryan. Like, and I want the team to come up with like, let's call it core values or what's our brand. I want to be involved in that and I want to sort of drive it, but I also want them to come to it on their own. I'm learning from them. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from Pat. So I do think it's like a collective. I just have this weird title of head coach, which I guess is good, but I think we're all leaders and there's leadership within the team. But to your point of like, I always was the captain. And the coaches always really liked me, like, and they always, pointed to me as like, hey, do like this guy. And so that's always come to me and selfishly, I hated losing and I just wanted to win so bad. And delusionally, like the teams I was at, I was like, we should be really good like that. Like, why can't we be the best team? And that's carried over into my coaching with Princeton, especially. I mean, I delusionally took the job and was like, hey, we're going to win the Ivy League. We're going to have all Americans and national champs. They hadn't won an Ivy League match for like 6 years. And Cornell was there. They were having multiple national champs at the time and people thought I was insane, but we did those things. We did it. So I think that, yeah, I mean, winning is probably, I don't talk about it a lot, but I love it. But I was always the leader because I wanted our teams to be successful. But I do believe in I think that not everyone, but there's leaders within the group that can really help us get there quicker if you give them permission to lead. So yeah, I think I don't know if that was the answer. I kind of got off track. I'm not sure, but I tend to
No,
do that.
it was good. It was good. I think you do a great job of building that culture where everybody feels empowered to speak up with that. And I think that's something that not all leaders do. And it's funny you say that you like control because like I don't feel like you're that way. I think I said it to you the other day. Like you're very chill. You're not very laid back. I don't know
That's
if
good.
that makes sense. It makes sense to people that know you.
Yeah.
But you're very much like you let stuff happen, but then you also guide it too and make people feel like they're coming to their conclusions. And I think that it's a really difficult balance to hold, and you do a great job at it. So I didn't know but it makes sense. Like growing up, you're captain a lot. You've thought about this a lot, and obviously you do your research a lot. You've built your coaching philosophy book. What made you ultimately decide to do that? Because I thought that was one of the coolest things I saw when you first brought that out.
Yeah.
Talking about you.
So there were two things happened. One was, I had all these great lessons. I had these great coaches. I said this today at a team meeting, I went to Blair. I was coached by Buxton, maybe one of the best high school coaches in the country. At Newton High School, the head coach, Rick Peterson, he was a D1 wrestler. He was seeded number 1 in the country at heavyweight. Didn't work out for him. He didn't win it. He didn't place, but he was at a high level as well. Lockhaven was really good back in those days too. Mm-hmm. Down to like I had this coach, Coach Cup, who would do anything for me, and he didn't get paid. He was like he helped at the high school team, but if I wanted to get in on Sunday to get an extra workout, and I called him at 8 in the morning, he would open the gym for me and work out with me. So I learned a lot from him too. And then I had Strobel and Santor. So there was a lot of lessons I learned, and it was sort of like piecemeal though. It'd be like, wow, that was a good nugget Strobel told me there, but then I'd forget about it. So then I read the winner's manual, the Ohio State coach. There was a book where he wrote basically a book for the team. Can't remember. It's terrible. I can't remember the coach's name. I don't really follow sports, by the way, but, and I was like, I should make a manual because I've had all these awesome experiences and I have a philosophy. And my coach said too, he always said, you should be able to write down your philosophy as a coach. And so that's kind of the nexus for the book, that we gave. And that was at Princeton. We'll have one here. But again, I don't want it to be made to say like, hey, here's it for me. I want to get input too. So it'll be a slow rollout, I think, of like what we do with the Stanford team. But really it was just about me. It's a life philosophy too. I mean, there's character traits in it. I'm not going to give it away, but like I will give it away. So the 3 core character traits that every great person has had in my mind, if you did a study on this, discipline, attitude, and perseverance. I think you'd be hard pressed to go back in time and look at any great people who have done anything that's been like one of those wow things that didn't have those 3 things. And so there's other things I have in there as well, but just getting to like the core of it is the character traits that make you successful in wrestling are the same damn things that make you successful in anything you do in life, whether it be professionally, whether it be with your family, being a good father and a husband. And so for me, it was fun. It was actually fun. Like I hadn't revisited it since I got here, to be honest with you. And then we had our Missouri thing, and sort of attitude kind of was on the top of my mind. So going back in there and sort of reading those things was good for me to just solidify what I know. What I know is right in my mind in terms of what these guys can get from the program. So that's kind of how it came together. And it's just, for me, it was just, I want to take what I was taught one step further and make it a little bit better.
I love that. Discipline, attitude, and perseverance. I've heard the saying, the only things you can control are attitude and effort. And that's kind of, I think of discipline and perseverance are effort really. And attitude, but I love that and couldn't agree more.
Yeah. We had a long talk today about control and attitude and what it looks like in a match. And so it's good. It creates good conversation.
Absolutely. One more like kind of fun question I was thinking about, like Max and I are always talking about like what makes a good wrestler. So want to know, what do you think's the most important like athletic trait for wrestling? And obviously there's like a difference, right, in levels of wrestling, but there's like, what do you think's the most important thing if you could just make a wrestler? Max, maybe you have some more to add before.
Yeah, because we could get into a huge wormhole. So athletic trait, because I think like you started out this conversation with the most important thing for wrestling is in your head.
I was going to go there too. So
your brain.
Your narrowing of it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, athletically. Jesus.
So I'm probably not gonna answer your question, but because but I'm gonna address it. So I think in order to be really good at wrestling, you have to be special at something. Do you have, so maybe it's strength. Maybe your strength is like your X factor, right? Maybe it's your speed. Maybe your speed is your X factor. Strength for me was not my X factor. Like, like most guys were stronger than me. But right now I could get up and go run a mile without training pretty quickly. I was always able to do that. So I had good cardio. Like I could get my cardio like this. So, some people are great cardio. Some people are great athletes in terms of learning technique. Some people they know, it's like they're like a cat. You throw them up in the air, they know how to land. So I can't really pick one, but I'd have to say like, you have to be strong. You have to be strong. There's minimal levels of everything that has to be there. And so for me, I worked on my endurance, although I had it and it came naturally. I was pretty fast actually. So, I did plyos and stuff. I actually worked on those things too. But strength was a huge limiting factor to me. So what I would say is like I was below the minimal baseline I needed to be. So I had to work extra hard at strength to get to that minimal level where my other specialties could kick in that made me unique and able to compete at the highest level. So strength, I think strength wrestling's hard. It's two people pushing against each other. And, but then, you get to the question of like, there was a heavyweight at Princeton, and he'd always tell me his max, max deadlift and max bench. But the guy had no tank. I mean, it's like, yeah, you're strong for like, so, I got used to it. Hey, I benched, I don't know, 350. I don't know what he benched. I don't even care. I said, hey, you know what? Here's what I'd like you to do. I said, I don't care what you bench when you first go in there. I said, how about I want you to do 15 seconds on, 45 off on the aerodyne. Okay. I want you to do 6 of those. Okay. And then I want you to immediately bench your max and let me know what your max is after those. And then tell me what your max is. That's the what I'm interested in, because I don't really care what your max is. So I guess that sheds some light. There's all these components that feed into it, where pure strength isn't going to get it done.
Your answer is awesome. I think that of being good at one thing, and it's also there's a whole other wormhole we could go down, because there's things that are like nature, you just have, and there's things you can build and work on, and you can get better, but certainly you're kind of limited on how good you can be at different things based on your genetic cards you were dealt.
And that's what I'm talking about. My cardio. I literally had a gift that I could always win the races on the team. Like I just knew I knew how to. I was cardio, and I had the mental piece that I could keep going. But you put me under that bench press, or I was not winning the bench pressing contest. I promise you that.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point too, though. It's like whatever's your biggest weakness is probably what you're going to get the most out of.
Yeah,
so like,
that's
if
right.
you don't have like that baseline of strength, it's not going to work out well. If you don't have the baseline of cardio, it's not going to work out well. So the best athletic trait's different for each guy, depending on where they started naturally or what they're at.
Yeah, you might have to work at it a little more, but I think too, like lean into your strengths. Like that's what's going to make you great in terms of like knowing what I didn't try to out muscle someone, right? So like, because I lifted a lot to get to that bare minimum, it wasn't like all of a sudden, like now I'm strong. It was like, no, I was still leaning into my cardio and my technique and my speed. That's where I wanted to be. But having the strength at that baseline enabled me to compete against everyone. And I think knowing your strength is important too, because then you kind of it's like the guy that can wrestle in the open who's fast, right? It's like, and then the slow guy has to get his hands on him and slow him down. I mean, that's the common, like, dichotomy match of like, this guy's got it, and how can this guy avoid him? So, but they have to get to their strengths to win. If the fast guy gets all tangled up, he loses. If the strong guy doesn't get his hands on him, he loses. It's like one of those interesting things.
Yep. Or you can be like Ryan and just have it all.
Yeah, that's true.
No, that's not.
Hey, I could tell you firsthand, this guy works at everything, man.
I know.
He puts in the time.
It all,
he puts in the time.
He has all of it.
I'm a slow learner, but I try to learn. There's kind of a lighter note here to finish off, and then anything else if you want. But what about proposing to your wife at nationals? I think that's like, I mean, you said to me, you're like, I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. It's like, I come down after the podium, I'm going to propose. And obviously everybody in that arena is going to like try to hype that up. And so like, I don't know, walk me through that. I think that's an awesome story. And the fact that you thought it was going to be small cracks me up.
Yeah. So basically my senior year, I was all in. I hadn't placed yet. I was like, I'm going to place. And then my wife was a big part. We met in high school actually, and we were on and off. And then, by my sophomore year of college, we were pretty serious, and we kind of both knew we were going to get married. So I get a ring. I buy a ring with my credit card because I had no money. I buy a ring with the credit card, and I'm getting close to the summer. I work construction in the summer. I knew I'd get the money to pay it off then. So that was plan A. I'm just going to put it on credit. So I get the ring, and I'm trying to keep it super low key. So I'm like, okay, so I just want this to well, not between me and her, but I mean, I'm obviously doing this. So if I place, I'm going to get off the podium and I have to get her a credential to be a photographer. So that's the plan in my head. I'm like, all American thing. No one knows about it except I do and whoever gets her the media credential. And so, I'm just going to get off. I'm going to get on one knee. Everyone's going to scatter and I'm going to propose to her. I don't think it's going to draw attention because the thing's going on. Well, meanwhile, so my mom knows about it and I have to ask this lady who works for Lehigh to get me this pass. So two people know about it. And my mom, I'm pretty sure she's the one. So she's in the crowd with the Lehigh people. And all of a sudden it turns out like a lot of people know. And I know that a lot of people know I've already placed. So it's like going into the finals. So now it's like this big ordeal, like where it's like, the lady got me flowers to give to her. So now I have flowers. I'm trying to hide flowers. I have this ring in my pocket. So I don't know this though. So like, I'm upset that a lot of people know. I really don't want anyone to know. So I'm on the podium. They go through the All Americans, do the spin thing, and she's got the camera. She has no clue though. So that all ends, and I step off, and the announcer, it might have been Sandy Stevens, I don't know who it was, is like, we have a special moment going on near the podium. And I'm like, wait, what the hell is going on right now? And so I'm like walking over to my future wife and I'm going to propose to her. And I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, Chris Ayres is asking Lori to marry him. And so basically I get to my knee and I like get the ring out and I'm like, hey, will you marry me? And my wife, Lori, is like, God. So like, there's 50,000 people waiting there, you know what I mean? And I'm like sitting on my knee and she doesn't say anything. So I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I'll take that as a yes. So I just get up and I'm like, I pretty much direct her to the back and everyone's cheering and stuff. And we get into the back and I'm like, hey, well, like, what's the answer? And she's like, did you ask my parents? And I was like, yeah, I asked your parents. And she's like, oh, okay, yes. But it was like the place like erupted, like when I went down and I was like, I did not expect that. But it turned out like in the end, it was kind of cool in retrospect, but like that is definitely not what I wanted to happen. But yeah, so I proposed to my wife right off the podium. So pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story. I love that, and knowing Lori, that's so funny. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else from either you guys, Max or Chris, that you guys we didn't touch on that you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, you bring up Lori, so I just think it's pretty neat for her. Like, just speaking to, I always give a little shout out to women's wrestling, but like, it's funny with me. She would have wrestled. Honestly, she loves wrestling so much, but back then, there just wasn't an open door, and now she's the director of the RTC and doing an awesome job. So I just think it's really neat to pull in to allow women to take up those spaces that, she's loving what she's doing. And, Ryan, she's doing a great job. And I just
She's
think
awesome.
that
Yeah.
the women's stuff, women wrestling in college, I know Lehigh has got their club is up and going pretty quickly, growing. I think it's the answer. Like everyone's out. How do we save wrestling? It's the women. You add one woman, you add her parents, you add her grandparents. It's exponential growth of wrestling. And so, I'd throw that plug in there too, just for, the women's wrestling stuff has been awesome. And, we need to be more, we need to think about it a little bit more and be more active in promoting it.
Absolutely.
And
And
agree.
Lori's definitely the one like that's gonna get that done. Like
Yeah.
Lori is a rock star. She's gonna figure this out, and we're all behind her. So that's awesome. I love
She
that
was
plug.
she was proposed to at the National Wrestling
Uh,
Championships. I mean, she's the right one.
She
It
doesn't
was
have a
meant to
choice,
be.
right?
Yep.
Yes. Cool.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. We
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on. It was great talking to you, and this was awesome. I love getting to know you better, even though
Yeah,
I
same.
spent a lot of time with you too. So
That's
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you guys for having me. It's great seeing you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow, right?
yeah, awesome. We'll see
See
you soon.